So here's another conversation I had with my sister that's been recreated with AI generation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of torn. They're both, you know, could they both be right?
Yeah, both the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs are great teams for this Sunday's Super Bowl.
Oh no, I'm talking about last Sunday, Groundhog's Day, when Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow and Wiarton Willie didn't. Is it 6 more weeks of winter, or is spring just around the corner?
I'm old. I'm puzzled. And I'm only able to change one of those. I want to apologize for taking so long for getting back to part 3 of the Architectural Meteorological Prognostication Tour of 2024. Back in October, I released this short teaser for part 3. Hey, you want to see my big Willie? I'm going to show you my big Willie. I just couldn't decide how I wanted to tell the story, and I kept putting it off and doing other videos. But now that Groundhog Day has just happened, I guess it's about time I get around to finishing this story. When I drove down to Pennsylvania to go see Falling Water this summer, I realized on the way back I could stop in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, the home of Punxsutawney Phil, the main Groundhog Day groundhog for the United States. I live close to Wiarton, Ontario, which is the home of Wiarton Willie, the main Groundhog Day groundhog for Canada, and I thought it would make a funny idea for a video. Wiarton has statues of Willie around the town, and they have even built him his own indoor-outdoor home next to the public library, which allows people to see the current Wiarton Willie all year round. They have a memorial stone for the previous Willies that have died over the years. When I arrived in Punxsutawney, I saw that it was very similar, and they had a large sign announcing that this was the home of Punxsutawney Phil, and they had statues of Phil all around the town. They even have Phil's burrow connected to the public library, where the public can see Phil and his wife all year round. I checked the website of the Chamber of Commerce, who runs the Groundhog Day headquarters, and I saw that they did sell a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. So after visiting Phil, I headed over there. When the person behind the counter greeted me and asked me where I was from, I told her I was Canadian and from the place quite close to Wiarton, the home of Wiarton Willie. Honestly, I expected her to say something like, "Oh, our Canadian cousin," but that wasn't the reaction that I got. This is why it's taken so long for me to do this video, because I honestly didn't know if I should tell the full story of what happened. But I've decided that if I ever start a Patreon page, I will put out a video there telling the full story of my visit to the Punxsutawney Chamber of Commerce Groundhog Day store. So let's just say I bought the puzzle and I left. I had thought about going to a restaurant to have some lunch in Punxsutawney, but I just got on the road and carried on out of town. So to celebrate both Wiarton Willie and Punxsutawney Phil, I'm going to do the jigsaw puzzle Groundhog Day by the artist Lori Shkori. It's a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle from SunsOut's. So let's do this. From the Wikipedia entries for Punxsutawney Phil and Wiarton Willie. The Groundhog Day celebration is rooted in Germanic tradition that says that if a hibernating animal casts a shadow on February 2nd, the Christian celebration of Candlemas, winter and cold weather will last another 6 weeks. If no shadow is seen, legend says, spring will come early. In Germany, the tradition evolved into a myth that if the sun came out on Candlemas, a hedgehog would cast its shadow, predicting snow all the way into May. When German immigrants settled in Pennsylvania, they transferred the tradition onto the local fauna, replacing hedgehogs with groundhogs. On February 2nd each year, Punxsutawney holds a civic festival with music and food. During the ceremony, which begins well before the winter sunrise, Phil emerges from his temporary hole in Gobbler's Knob located in a rural area about 2 miles southeast of town. The event formally began in 1887, although its roots go back even further. Phil first received his name in 1961. The practices and lore of Punxsutawney Phil's predictions are predicated on the light-hearted suspension of disbelief by those involved. According to the lore, there is only one Phil, and this is the one groundhog that has lived to make weather prognostications since 1886, sustained by drinks of groundhog punch or elixir of life, administered at the annual groundhog picnic in the fall. The lifespan of a normal groundhog is roughly 6 years. 2 scrolls are prepared in advance of the actual ceremony, one proclaiming 6 more weeks of winter and one proclaiming an early spring. At daybreak on February 2nd, Punxsutawney Phil awakens from his burrow on Gobbler's Knob, is helped to the top of a stump by his handlers, known as the Inner Circle, and purportedly explains to the president of the Inner Circle, in a language known as Groundhogese, whether he has seen his shadow. The president of the Inner Circle, the only person to understand Groundhogese, through his possession of an ancient wooden cane, then interprets Phil's message and directs the vice president to read the proper scroll to the crowd gathered on Gobbler's Knob. Outside of Groundhog Day, Phil resides with his mate Phyllis at the Punxsutawney Memorial Library in a climate-controlled environment. Prior to 1993, the Groundhog Day event in Punxsutawney attracted crowds of approximately 2,000. The popularity of the film Groundhog Day brought significantly more attention to the event, with annual crowds rising to 10 to 20,000. The story of Wiarton Willie dates back to 1956. A Wiarton resident named Mac Mackenzie wanted to showcase his childhood home to his friends, so he sent out invitations for a Groundhog Day gathering. One of these invitations fell into the hand of a reporter from the newspaper, the Toronto Star, and so the reporter traveled to Wiarton looking for the Groundhog Day event. None of the townspeople knew about the festival, but once he mentioned Mac Mackenzie's name, he was directed to the Arlington Hotel, a local watering hole. There, the reporter found Mackenzie and his friends partying and was invited to join them. The next day, the reporter lamented to Mackenzie that he needed some kind of a story to take back to justify his expenses. So Mackenzie grabbed his wife's fur hat, dug a burrow in the snow, and pronounced a prognostication. The picture of Mac and the hat ran February 3rd, 1956 edition of the Toronto Star. A year later, about 50 people arrived for the festival. Half were reporters from various media, and so, seizing on the opportunity, Mackenzie invented a festival that has been added to over the years. Wiarton Willie himself is a more recent addition to the festivities. In the early years, prognostications was provided by a mythical trio of groundhogs, Grundoon, Muldoon, and Sandoon. Willie appeared on the scene in the 1980s. Wiarton Willie's predictive powers have been attributed by his followers to his situation on the 45th parallel, exactly halfway between the equator and the North Pole. The current Wiarton Willie is Wiarton Willie 5 and was introduced at the 2022 Groundhog Day celebration.
So I'm headed back down. There's a shadow up here. Get ready for 6 more weeks of winter this year. So now let's wake up, Willie! Wake up, Willie! Wake up, Willie! Wake up, Willie!
Willie did not see his shadow. We will have an early spring.
Yeah!
So that's it for the groundhogs. I drove on across the border and over to Niagara Falls and stayed there overnight. So that'll be part 4 of the Architectural Meteorological Prognostication Tour of 2024 with waterfalls. It was an enjoyable puzzle and an enjoyable trip. And as for who's right, Punxsutawney Phil or Wiarton Willie, will it be 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring? I don't know. In this area of Ontario, we've been nailed with some pretty bad snow. There's a local highway here where the snowdrifts are 12 feet tall and they've turned them into homemade billboards. I drove past yesterday and snapped a picture. And in comparison, here's the Google Street View of the exact same spot. You can see how far that snow is drifted in from the top of that little hillock right to the road. And I hope you appreciate that photograph, because when I took it yesterday, I wound up actually getting stuck in a snowbank. Luckily, thanks to a couple of local people with a truck, they were able to pull my car back out. So thanks for watching the video. Also in the comments is a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page if you'd like to support this channel. And subscribe to this channel to see what other nonsense I can get up to. Because, you know, I'm old, I'm bored, and I'm only able to change one of those.